Okay, a very, very warm welcome to the Bylines Network podcast to Marina and Jemma. A lot of our listeners are going to be really interested in hearing what you have to say on a number of topics. Some of the things are really topical and some might go back in time a bit, but this first one is about what is happening right now. So over to Lydia.
So I think we should dive in with something we know will be on the front of everyone's minds. I mean, there'll be Nigel's shaped elephant in the room for the next 45 minutes if we don't talk about it. So it's a little over a week after, obviously, the local elections and a major by-election in the UK, where Reform took a number of councils and a parliamentary seat by just 6 votes. Farage is now calling his party the popular opposition to the Labour government. Do you guys think that's the case? What did Labour do next, and how do we go from here?
Shall I tell you what Labour shouldn't do? They shouldn't try to out-reform reform. It's such a terrible, terrible strategy. All you're going to do by doing that, and we've seen it with some of the immigration policy announcements today, all you're going to do is you are going to make people think, oh, well, what reform is offering, it must be right, because now Labour are chasing them. And you're going to isolate what would be Labour voters while you're doing that as well. So they just need to remember who their voter base is. And you've got people, we've always been, I think it's every single election since the Second World War, bar one, it's always been left of centre that has actually won the vote. And we need to remember that, because at the moment, so many people are feeling politically homeless. So starting with immigration, I am so despairing. I'm sure, Jemma, I probably could speak for you as well now. We're like one. I'm so just bored of this lack of imagination from Labour. It's really simple. Like, people don't care. I don't think, right? And maybe I'll be proved wrong, but I don't think people care what nationality their doctors are, their nurses, the people that work in schools, the people that work in care homes, whatever. Where they care, the real bugbears are things like the hotels that people are seeing in their local towns, which are being given to immigrants at a huge cost to the taxpayer. Also the boats, even though that's completely been whipped up, I think it was about 37,000 in 2024 that came over via small boats. Those are the things that people need, that Labour needs to address, because if you're just going to cut immigration by this arbitrary number, it's not going to make any difference to people unless you tackle those two things. They could bring immigration down from, 700 whatever thousand to 200,000. But if you're still doing those things, it won't make one jot of difference. Also, you're just going to actually hurt the economy further, because you're just going to slow down growth as we see more issues around the workforce, and you're going to hurt our sectors like NHS, social care, horticulture, agriculture, hospitality, you name it. So I just wish that Labour would be a little bit more in tune with actually what people are saying on the doorstep.
Yeah, agree. Also, the first part of your question was about, do you think they are the popular opposition? Absolutely. And I think we underestimate them at our peril. And I think the problem is, to an extent, again, I don't want to keep speaking for us because it's weird. It sounds like we've been married and something for that 30 years. To an extent, I suppose I am in a little bit of a bubble, in that I sort of live in London, for starters, and, all my friends are very socially liberal, and, I have a friend who lives near Wigan. She said everybody she speaks to, and they're not massively political animals, but they absolutely do believe that Nigel Farage is the answer, and it's because their messaging is so much more on point. It is tapping into something. And yes, there is an element within that of just outright racism, which they can harness when they're talking about the India free trade deal. They're like, oh my God, all these people coming over here and, not giving to our homegrown workers. But beyond that, it is far more a sense of, my life is horrible at the moment. I can't afford X, Y, and Z, cost of living and all of that. And they're not going to go, oh, well, it's 14 years of austerity. Oh, and it's this and it's that. It's like, yeah, if they are seeing up the road, as you say, hotels, and they are being told like this scapegoat all the time, it does make sense in their head. And when you tout that number around of, 55 million quid a week on the cost of hotels, like that does sound absolutely ridiculous. And it's the same simplicity as that bloody bus that went around during Brexit. That number, that'll stop paying them, that goes to the NHS. And I just think most people aren't looking into it that deeply, and I agree. I think Labour's cons are
Thank you, Gemma. I found your comment interesting about Wigan as well because I write for Northwest Bylines and Wigan comes under the Northwest. And I've written, about sort of the recent rise of reform in the Northwest. Do you think this is the case in most areas, or do you think it's more prevalent in some, like is it like a countrywide thing? Do you think, or I mean, given the
again, you're more expert on that than me. Mine was anecdotal based on one friend. But I have one friend as well who also lives in Kent, and he was saying, I never thought I'd see the day that Kent was Reform Council. It is now. And yeah, this is why it is so important to have a sort of cross section of friends who don't just come from up the road. So yeah, if you ask me today, because the one thing I do also think is a week is a long time in politics, right? There's absolutely no way any of us can predict what's going to happen over the next 2-3 years. God knows. Look what we've all been through. Look at what we've gone through just since Marina and I started doing the trawl. It's been mad. But if you had to predict right now, yeah, I think you'd get in. If there was an election tomorrow, 100%. And then again, it's only my opinion. I think that they'd be so inept, and that things would not improve. And that would be that, and that would be the end of that cycle. And then you probably usher in something more progressive again. It's very tiring. You seem to get these cycles in history, and it's a little bit like what's happening in the States right now. I was looking, I think a number of those reform councillors who got in only last week quit already because they didn't really know what the job description was. And they were kind of asked to stand, and there hasn't been a proper vetting process. And it's quite funny, long ago. And they were going to say, oh, how can I get my position filled? They don't actually want to do it. So, behind all of this clever, if you want to say that, campaigning, there doesn't seem to be much substance.
Can I just add to that as well, to your question, Lydia, is that unfortunately what ends up happening is you find it is the left behind sort of communities, constituencies that are in the worst situation, that are then desperate for some kind of solution. And what they're looking at the moment, Tories are sort of terminal. They are a declining force. And then you've got Labour, who, for the time they've been in power, of course they have done some good things. We don't always hear about it, but it actually feels like, who are they coming for? They're coming for winter fuel allowance, and they are now disable people PIP payments. Yeah, it does it. And then now with the spin, even though it's factually incorrect, they're being told that the India-UK trade deal is going to undermine British workers. So all of these things are going to make people who are already despondent, disillusioned go, well, it can't be Labour. It's not going to be the Tories. And then along comes Reform with this beautifully simple sounding silver bullet, which, because they don't get interrogated properly, because they are platformed bloody everywhere, means that, of course, people who don't have the bandwidth to be as invested in politics like we are going to think, well, I'll give them a go. And it's going to be another protest vote situation as it was with Brexit.
My question would be, what do journalists do about reform? I mean, is the rise of Nigel Farage and reform partly the mainstream media's fault because they're being platformed everywhere? They're saying stuff without being questioned. So what do journalists and citizen journalists specifically do about reform?
This is a tricky one because at the top of the tree, like where you've got the Question Times and the shows like that, or the BBC, whatever, these organisations, these newspaper media outlets, whatever, they have targets to meet, right? When we strip it right back down, they're like any other organisation where they are measured on particular metrics, and that will be views, clicks, whatever, click-through rate, that kind of thing. Sadly, they're not measured on societal impact or anything that's a bit more long-term than that. So when you've got people like, especially many of these will be junior like researchers, junior producers for shows who are trying to find guests, they just want someone that's going to come in, spout a view, and give a nice bit of clickbait. And I think this is the problem. So we're basically platforming these people like Farage, who, let's be honest, great television, right? Jemma and I talk about him and the other idiots in the party often on the trawl because they're entertainment. And I think this is part of it, right? You just have to look over to the States to see it's the same thing. But we are all drawn to the more sort of entertainment side of this, the really outlandish remarks, and also the very simple sound bites. So basically what we need much more responsible journalism. Now, I appreciate that what that means is when you go long form, you're going to narrow down your audience because people haven't got that same interest, and it's not as entertaining. And are you going to really read about the intricacies of the Indo-UK trade deal, or are you going to take Nigel Farage's 60-second clip that he's posted on social media, speaking to you using a rhetoric that sounds like he's speaking to you, he's one of you? Like, it's a really difficult position, but the media has to start being more bloody responsible. In particular, the BBC, who you could say it's down to the BBC for actually creating brand Nigel.
I do agree to an extent, but yet, when you talk about click-through and things, when George Monbiot, for instance, went on Question Time and spouted viscerally and angrily about something wonderful, then that went viral, like hugely viral. You know, if they were to book you or me or some and Ash Sakar or someone, they do have these echoes, they do go viral. My feeling, I was really thinking about this, I think the trouble is, I don't think once you think something, you're moved by any of us particularly. I think you're entrenched in your view, and it's become so tribal. You're on that team or that team, and you're either annoyed by that person or you find yourself clicking along and you're like, oh my God, that guy on Question Time in the audience was amazing, we share it. I think people need to feel that their life is better. That's it. I literally think that if Starmer had come in and done one or two things that made everybody feel better off, it'd be fine. And he hasn't. He hasn't. He's done some good stuff that might long term that it would get there, but where he hasn't had the nous, in my opinion, raise the income tax threshold. Do it, and then tax above, and who cares about the consequences? Make everybody go, oh my God, I've got 900 quid more. Like, people are skint. And I just feel like, do something clever, nursery piece, just something, and you can call it gimmicky or whatever, but just give people a bone. But no, took away the winter fuel allowance, going for people's disability allowance. The non-dom things of like, who cares really? People aren't. It sort of sounds quite good, but they've watered it down, and it's not going to instantly make you feel better. I do think, and going back to the journalist point, like, I think everything, like even like what Bylines Network do, all the investigative stuff, all the exposing all of the links and the corruption and the this and that is an incredibly important job to do. But it's about being digestible, and it's about reach. And I think sometimes people they switch off, sadly, unless it is in a bite-sized format for them and it is platformed somewhere where they already have some degree of fidelity, or they're tuned in anyway. Yeah. Social media, the right are really good at it. You know, there is a reason Nigel Farage got a big following on TikTok.
Yeah.
And, and again, we don't get booked on Question Time. We'd have a go, wouldn't we?
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that, but we're slightly talking to ourselves on the trawl, and I don't see it as my responsibility to sort of like make people change their mind. I sort of don't think that I'm that important. But what's nice about the trawl is it's more a community, and it's like somewhere to vent and somewhere for people to think I'm not going bonkers. But if I was asked to go on somewhere, I would. And I think the good thing is we speak like normal people. And I think when you hear about people, when you hear Starmer, it's just, it just doesn't cut through.
We need a Farage.
Where's Rena gone? What's happened to her? She's gone quiet.
Yeah, she has. We need a Farage for the left, essentially. That's what we need.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, can't you two be the Farage for the left? I think a lot of people probably see you as the sort of, popular voice for the left.
I mean, I would happily take that baton, but I think it will take an army. Like we do our bit, and I know that we've got. I think a lot of it is just like talking sense, but we do what we can, right? I did it this morning. I'm on Jeremy Vine's show this morning, talking with someone who is pro monarchy and pro just arbitrary immigration caps, and you try and just spell things out in a way that breaks it down for people. We're fighting this wave, this huge millionaire backed wave of content that is for goodness sake, at one point Farage is backed by Musk. How do you even start to combat that?
And now they've got Nick Candy is a very prominent part of reform. You know, they're powerful. They are powerful. They are the metropolitan elite. And there's a little bit of us, we discussed this last week, and again, like, it is really important. And what you guys do, this amazing service where often, for me, what you write is a source, you know, and I'm like, oh, that's great, and I need to check that, and that's, okay, that's really affirming what my instinct is, and, you know, so it all is important. And, you know, we shouldn't sort of give up. But there is a little part of me that doesn't want to spend the next few years just with my cortisol raised through the roof, just feeling stressed. You can see in the States, people so angry. They're losing their minds over there. And maybe we're just going to be in for a bit of that. And then it comes good again.
I think that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing your opinions on that. I was just wondering, like, you must have had a turning point, sort of politically speaking, where, you know, you've gone, okay, like, I need to make a stand. Like, everyone's got that point, obviously, that they reach where they're like, right, no, I need to talk about this. I know that as someone who writes about politics myself sometimes. Tell us about that. What made you so determined to speak out and speak your mind? Maybe it will give other people a way in to, you know, have that same turning point.
I think Jemma and I would say the same word.
Yeah.
Brexit. It was Brexit. It was. I was largely apathetic prior to Brexit, and it was that sent me on this just falling down rabbit holes, essentially, because I couldn't quite understand how it had been allowed to happen, how it could have happened, how so many people could have believed all of the nonsense. And then once you dip your toe in the water, it's very difficult not to. And I think what ended up happening is at that time there was what felt like a real dereliction of duty from our media to be talking about the actual realities of the situation. Like, if the BBC, and I use the BBC as an example, but it's not just the BBC, but if the media had actually done its job in showing both sides, and by that I don't just mean finding one person who thinks one thing and another person who's the only person that thinks the other way, like, I think maybe then we wouldn't have actually ended up with Brexit. So it felt like the media had this dereliction of duty, and people like myself, people like Jemma, people like Femi, Zoe Gardner, loads of other people, Mike Galsworthy, all these people who just felt like, hang on a second, why isn't this being spoken about? And they would use their little platforms, which then grew into bigger platforms, to talk about this in a way that just resonated with people. And I think the growth of channels and platforms like mine and Gemma's, etc., is because people felt that there wasn't, that no one was speaking for them. No one was actually saying or echoing their thoughts. So, for example, I used to watch the Andrew Marr show on a Sunday morning, and I would just pause it, and I would just formulate my thoughts and then just write something, but just break it down really simply, just in a one sort of pithy tweet. And just that was enough to sort of hammer things home for people, like make it relevant, use funny analogies or whatever like that. And that was my way of venting that I think, other people obviously took solace in as well.
And yeah, so Brexit was, yes, I sort of knew surface amount really before. It'd always been sort of left-leaning, but fairly woolly, really, liberally. And I'll be completely honest with you, after Thatcher, when I was sort of very young, I didn't sort of, it was great when Blair got in. I remember feeling really jubilant, and I was so lucky to be young then. It felt pretty damn good. But then when Cameron got in, I remember thinking, oh well, it'll be okay. Jeez. And then Brexit, and my instinct was, no, what are we thinking? And then it was James O'Brien really radicalised me. And I started, his show starts at 10. And I mean, I'm freelance, but I was taking the mick sometimes, just trying to listen to, desperate to hear the latest in the saga. And the minute you start going down, and I'd be interested to know, Lydia, you're way younger than me. What got you?
Thanks for the question. I think really, just like in the morning, my mum would put the news on. So I was exposed to the news from quite a young age, like old enough to understand bits here and there. I mean, I can see Brexit as being a turning point, but I think also people at school, like, who knew about things from the internet, those sorts of things. I think their perspectives sort of challenged my own, and I was like, oh well, yeah, I believe in capitalism, but socially I'm liberal. And then I think that shifted quite drastically when I was about maybe 14, 15. I was like, no, like I'm more left, so I think that was my turning point. So I have had that very young, but I think I'm for the better for it now, and I'm so grateful that I have a voice and platform where I'm able to, talk to people about their views. And
yeah, good for you, just a curious mind. And I think that sometimes I perhaps, I've always had like various interests, but perhaps thought that, did I have anything intelligent to say about it or whatever? And I think that confidence has grown and grown and grown and grown. And it's a bit like, when you go to an art gallery, perhaps for the first time, you might feel a little bit intimidated to sort of say, oh yeah, I really like that painting, but you don't really know why. But then at one point I was hanging out with a very sort of arty crowd, because my ex-husband worked in that, and I soon realised, no, it's just subjective. It's no right or wrong. You peel it back. It's not that mysterious. You're entitled to have a view, blah, blah, blah. And it's the same with politics. I think the more you say something and people just go, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Except it's not subjective. It's bloody fact-based. And that's the issue,
Yes.
is that we're dealing with people who almost take it's all about their feeling. Well, I feel this. I feel. Well, no. Like, what is the actual data? But sadly, we are so much more as a species motivated by feeling than by fact.
Yeah, and I felt increasingly angry that all these people, these generally speaking awful people in the Tory government were making decisions based on self-serving reasons, sort of just, or incompetence, and the more I thought, I was like, oh my God, these people are supposed to be protecting our interests and serving us, and look at the standard of them. And the more you realise that, the more infuriating it is. So in the end, it becomes, I have to say something, and if I don't, I feel, bad. Because also, when I first got political, I was trying to protect my job and my kids, and it doesn't always do you any favours. Like if Marina and I had a podcast about someone else, we'd be making a lot more money out of it, right? We do okay, but it's like politics is very alienating for some people, controversial, too opinionated women.
Jemma, if we moved over to the right, we'd be quids in. Not more money on the right.
Yeah, or we were just talking about, showbiz, just, a bit more bland. But no, this is what we're passionate about. Exposing all the grifters. I mean, Dame Andrew Jenkins is a mayor.
Talking about your podcast, The Trawl, it is utterly brilliant. It is so analytical. It's relatable. I actually can't not laugh when I listen to it. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's one of the only all-female political shows, which is a huge thing for me personally, to listen to two women talk about politics. And what makes it so unique is you're listening to people who aren't talking down to you like they're from the establishment. You're kind of one of us. We're kind of in the living room with you. We're kind of sitting down having a coffee like friends. I mean, sometimes, I don't know if you remember this, Marina, you kind of invite us in. You DM'd me back in the summer of 2023 to say that you'd used one of my rage tweets, shall we say, on the podcast.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I was like, I feel really part of the podcast. But my question, I suppose, where I'm going with this is, what do you think makes your show so unique, and why is it so popular?
When we started, we didn't really know what we were doing.
Jemma asked me to do a podcast. I was like, okay. I was on maternity leave at the time. I thought, okay.
And it was more like, I just had this very strong instinct. I wanted to work with Marina. That was sort of it. And then the fact, I just had this feeling. I've worked on TV a lot, done a lot of writing. I sort of had a pretty strong idea that together we would be able to produce something quite good. I remember having a few chats before we really got going, and I think there's a few things that have stood in our favour. The first one was, we both agreed, no one cares about us. So I said, let's try and really make this full of stuff, that is interesting. And I think that's the Trawl's golden point. It's clips, it's other people's great, funny stuff, interesting stuff, mad stuff, and then we talk about it. But the second ingredient that had to work was our chemistry. Because as you say, Jemma, if you are in a living room, a podcast is one of the most intimate media genres there is. And so essentially it's me, Marina, and that other person. It's not booming out to thousands of people, although. So it has to feel like nice between us. That chemistry had to work. And I've had other podcasts, again, there's one that I'm not going to say because it's a really massively successful podcast. It's actually not politics. I actually really enjoy it and still listen to it from time to time because I find it really informing. But sometimes the chemistry between the two people is slightly jarring, and it means I don't listen to every episode. So I said to Marina, it's like it'll either gel between us or it doesn't. And I think we can safely say we gel.
I would also add to that we are your news and politics, not update, because by the time you get around to listening to us, we're much later than everyone else. I'm sorry, guys. We've got families to juggle. We've got full-time jobs to juggle. We get to it when we get to it. We've got our record times. But we aren't there to be your news source. We are there to chat about it in a way that isn't going to make you want to jump off a cliff, right? We are there to bring a bit of levity to it. We are there to talk about it in a way that you and your mates would talk about it down the pub. And we are there to be, I think, more and more a source of comfort for people. So they do come to us. I think people have said, like the last episode, someone wrote in our Spotify comments, was like, laugh, cry, laugh. Or because it is like we take people on a roller coaster, and we will not shy away, by the way, from the tough subjects. We have talked about them. We can do serious, and of course we do, but we try and keep it light, and it's like a community of let's be honest, like it's like collective, like therapy.
Yeah, and I don't mean to speak so colloquially sometimes, but I am just chatting to Marina, so why am I going to not occasionally say what a bell end? And that has become almost a catchphrase, which we didn't plan. But how nice that we've got the freedom to say that, and also not be really insulting or derogatory, rather than then you tune into a radio station and they're really discussing it as if this sort of stupid thing that's happened is, well, maybe there's something in that. But no, there isn't. It's just stupid.
and also we are biased. We're completely
totally
openly biased. But yeah, we're not going to try and be impartial when it doesn't make sense to be. And I think what's also really nice is that like we have such a broad audience base, and we have, as two women, I think we were the first, as far as I'm aware, I think we were the first all-female podcast, and the majority of our listeners are male, which I think is yeah, and I think it really speaks to the fact that it's not a visual thing. You're just listening to two women talk about this sort of thing, but that in itself, I think, is a huge testament to the content. But it's had praise from Cara Vorderman, like James O'Brien, Gary Lineker.
I think the great thing is as well, I mean, we don't hear many voices like yours. Like, there's not many places we can hear voices like yours, coming from someone who's left wing themselves. Like, so much you say is sort of right leaning and that sort of thing, especially in the current climate, I think. And obviously a lot of people who say things, you do get a lot of criticism and abuse on social media. We know that you do yourselves. And it's something that personally I might have to deal with as inspiring, left-wing journalist, trying to get my voice out there. So I was wondering, how do you guys keep going? Do you feel you have to, or is it more like it's more like you want, like, do you feel you are obliged to your community almost, or is it more like that enjoyment aspect as well? Like, I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I think if it wasn't for the trawl, I'd have packed in the social media a bit, because it was so exhausting in the run-up, and now Labour are like just a bit disappointing, and because the election is far away. But I am so passionate about the trawl, and it is my huge outlet, and I'm addicted to doing it. And if people stop listening, we stop. But they are there.
I'd miss it. I'd miss it greatly.
just talk to myself. Every bit of rubbish that we do get so much niceness, don't we? We really do. Like, people are lovely. I mean, I bumped into a girl in the street the other day. Well, she actually asked me, I thought she was asking for directions, but she wasn't. She just wanted to say she listened to the Trawl. And she was about 26, 27. And it just means so much, that she is listening. I'm just so...
I will say as well, and Lydia, you will get this. Like, the more sort of well-known you become, the more you put out pieces that will ruffle feathers, but just you have to develop a really, really thick skin. And I think you also have to be really disciplined about how much you read in the responses. And we're always going to be tempted to have a look at what people are saying about us. I've just been on Jeremy Vine this morning, and I'm no doubt my phone is buzzing away with people who I hate what I've said. And especially the misogyny. I've been called already this morning peroxide Purkiss, this, that, other thing. Someone else, in fact, Nick Buckley, who is an MBE, has actually written, I wish something like I wish this migrant, talking about me, would stop talking about my country. I was born in North. I know, Gemma, we'll talk about this on the Trawl. I was born in Northwest London. Like, how dare you? Like, how dare you suggest? And even if I were a migrant, I'm allowed to talk about this country, but I'm not born here. And you get
so
horrid.
Low.
I mean, that's really low, and you'll get loads of it, right? Especially given, since Musk's takeover and just ruining Twitter. So I do tweet, I would say 75% less than I did, but it's not going to stop me. And that's exactly what they want, right, as well. They want to sort of cower you into sort of silence. So just keep doing what you're doing. I would say another thing I've also had to do is, since I used to post with a much smaller platform, I used to be a little bit more vitriolic, is that the word? Like, I'd really go for people, and I have really tamed it down, because I've had to, because otherwise the vitriol you receive back is really quite scary at times. So just, you can be super measured. Responded to Nick Buckley, I called him a balloon, right? Nothing more harsh than that. So nice and measured, make your point, and don't read the comments.
Okay, so with Brexit, for instance, we were right. It's really damaged our economy. End of. So, I also think Nigel Farage would not run the country well. I mean, if he came in and then it was all absolutely amazing, great, but it won't be. So I think long term you've got to stick to your truth and not just say things, but just think there are enough people who do agree.
And also don't get perturbed by someone coming after you and your looks when they've got the profile picture of a motorbike.
Yeah, or a dog, or they themselves might not be an oil painting. I mean, I've had things as well, things like, oh, she's put on a bit of timber, she'll need that chair reinforced. And then you look at who's saying it, and it's like a man in a vest who's like, you're not love. Do you know what?
Sorry, you mentioned America, obviously. Speaking about patriarchy and men dominating politics, on the podcast you call out political leaders when they lie and take on authoritarianism about fear. It's really inspirational. And obviously there's one on the global stage playing footloose with the truth, perhaps more than anyone else. Donald Trump, who you excellently took down the peg two, by the way, in the recent Trawl episode. A week of DC Trump strikes again. Sadly, we get a lot of people in America contacting us because they're afraid to take him on, or just finding they don't have the right media channels to expose him anymore. I guess given the shift to the right. So what I'd like to ask is, what's your advice for other journalists and citizens in the US or anywhere else who are worried about Trump?
Difficult, I think, because in the States, obviously, you just get omitted from the Oval Office, right? So you lose that line in to the Oval Office, and you lose the story. So I think there is a line that can be taken. There's one particular news channel, I can't think what it is. Is it I don't know if it might be CNN, but there's a reporter there, a brunette lady, and she is brilliant. I can't think of her name. I'm sure one of you knows the one I mean, but no, but she's also excellent. She is MSNBC. Must be someone from CNN.
What, the famous Amanpour?
No, not her. But anyway, the point is, she's always in the Oval Office. You can tell her politics. She asks brilliant questions, but she would never do so in a way, I think, that would see her removed from that room. So she asks the question, she gets the answer. But I would also say that the news channels need to find their balls, and there needs to be some sort of coalition between them so that they all hold steady and don't succumb to this pressure. A bit like Harvard, a bit like how universities are reacting. Like Harvard, if they had just fallen into line, if they had buckled, then they would have set the path for every other university that got attacked, but they didn't. And I think that's what the the media landscape over in the US has to do as well.
So unfortunately, I think this is going to have to be the last question. So thank you both so much, because it's been absolutely fantastic having you guys on. If there was one thing you could tell the citizen journalists at Bylines Network how to smash through the patriarchy, one thing I've noticed about you two is that you really are smashing walls down for women in politics. No, seriously, you really are. And I'd just like to know what you would say, one thing that our citizen journalists can do to keep smashing those walls down, to keep breaking down the patriarchy and bringing more women into politics.
Don't be scared. It is heavy
question,
because,
isn't it?
you know, it is a very male-dominated area, and as a woman, you do get loads of jip. But I guess just be inspired by the women who are speaking out, like the Zoe Gardners and Grace Blateleys, and, you know, there are many. Nicola Thorpe, you know, Natasha Devon is an amazing voice. Like, there are many, and women like yourselves. Follow them, support them, share them. You know, Ashley James is doing some good work. You know, support other women. That's what I would say. Lean into them, share their stuff. Let's all work together to amplify each other's voices. You know, yeah, and then you feel really part of something and really sisterly. You know, make friends, reach out to people who feel like you do, and get together like Marina and I have. If you have that interest, you've got nowhere to put it. You know, that's the one positive about social media, is it can connect you to really great people, and you might be surprised, land in someone's DMs and just go, I really like what you're saying. If I've had a bad day at the office, I've got Marina. I can go, oh, guess what Dame Andrew Jenkins said about me? I'm absolutely gutted. Absolutely devastated. And she can go, Jem, it's all right.
Be unapologetically you. Like, women have got a tendency, and we've all, you know, we tend to suffer from things like imposter syndrome more. We tend to make ourselves smaller more, be a bit more like, oh, do I deserve to be in this space? Yes, you do. And it took me a while. Like, we operate in a sea of mediocrity, because people end up in their positions because of cronyism, or knowing the right people, or someone's father worked at this newspaper and got me a job, right? If you are in this position, you deserve to be there. Use your platform, be unashamed about it, and just be bold. Like, the reason you're there is because you know your shit, and just believe in it.
Thank you very, very much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk to us. It has been an absolute pleasure. I could talk for hours, so we're going to have to wrap it up, because you guys
Gemma,
are so
now you
busy.
say it,
So
I've enjoyed loads of your tweets, I think. So Lydia, yeah, where are your both your biggest platforms up to follow you?
Twitter, but like you ladies, I get
Are
a
you
lot
on Blue
of
Sky? Do we do a bit
abuse.
of Insta?
I'm
Yeah,
on
we'll
Blue
all
Sky.
connect. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Find
on
you.
Blue Sky, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm still sticking the head
well
above
done.
the parapet and refusing to be pushed back down. So
Yeah,
thank you
well
very
done.
much.
Lovely to speak to you.